is on pyrolysis, and it's going to be moderated by Dr. Andrea Neal with Blue Fuels. I actually asked Andrea to moderate this session after she called me with her interest in doing projects in Florida and California. So I appreciate her efforts to moderate this program and keep our gentlemen on time. So with that, I'm going to turn it right over to you.
Okay, we're looking a little bit sleepy here, so everyone get up. Everyone stand up, stand up. Shake it out a little bit. And for these amazing gentlemen up here, can you give them a round of applause? All right. So I've had the pleasure of communicating and getting to know these amazing gentlemen that are going to speak to you today, and they're very exciting, and they've got exciting projects and exciting innovations and exciting directions of where the industry is going. As you all know, this is one of the highest growth industries out there. So plastics to fuel is growing about 28% a year right now. So this is an industry that's hot. We're all trying to get into it, and these gentlemen have a lot of great experience to share with us. So first, I want to introduce you to James Pfeiffer. He's the Vice President of Special Projects with Green Waste Energy. James, if you come on up and start your presentation.
Thank you and good morning. So, reduce, reuse, recycle. We all hear this all the time, especially from the government. You can't hear anything written by the government without hearing this. But I don't believe they do it. You know, they talk it, but they don't do anything about it. So let's see if I can. There we go. So in Hartford, there's a burn plant shut down. All the waste in the state of Connecticut is being shipped out of state. Now, think of that equation in terms of the rest of the states. The waste has got to go somewhere, right? So this won't work across the board. In Utah, there's an incinerator plant that got fined so much that they were shut down, and they still have the site, but it's, nothing's going on. Now, anyway, Illinois passes a PFAS incineration ban. So we've heard about PFAS on and off in here already, and at least that's the way I pronounce it. So we're going to talk a little bit about that too. So, who am I? I'm James Pfeiffer with Green Waste Energy. Our technology is based on pyrolysis. And we think that we have a solution to solving a lot of the waste to energy problems going on. We all know that waste is a basic problem that needs a solution. And that landfills, we've already heard this too, generate methane, which adds to the global warming. So the number one source of CO2 emissions are automobiles. The number two source is electric generation or power generation. You could get a little sarcastic in terms of electric cars. You're changing number one for number two. But at any rate, and then waste, in terms of landfills, and incineration is number three in terms of CO2 emissions. Obviously, like Connecticut, a dense state, space for waste is running out. So our technology, which we call Advanced Recycling and Energy Conversion, or just C6, because it's the sixth iteration of us shooting at it, it complements recycling in terms of things like metals and glass, but it does not replace it. And then pyrolysis. So how many of you guys know what pyrolysis is? Just raise your hand. So, okay, so this is, better than your average student body or whatever. I had it in chemistry in high school, and I'm not a young man, as you can tell, so it's been around for a while. So recycling can be excuse me, confusing. In my town in northern New Jersey, there's different rules for recycling from a place we go and visit in southern New Jersey. It's like every county has its own different set of rules. You know, and pizza boxes in general should be, you know, be clean, and they're certainly one of the dirtiest things. And in general, they're not. And if they're not, you know, they should be thrown away, not go in a recycling bin. So there's all kinds of issues with recycling, and there's lots of different categories of plastic bags and things like that. So it's confusing. What we want to do is take that confusion out and convert anything that's calorific, anything that can burn, but we're not going to burn it, but anything that's calorific into a synthetic gas, and divert it from landfills and create, you know, this synthetic gas which can be used to make electricity. At the bottom there, I want to point out that we can process organic waste too. Composting takes, we've heard about, it takes about 30 days. We take about 5 hours. When we process anything, but especially in this case, organic waste, so we're going to produce a high calorific gas that's cleaned, and we're going to produce a residue. And in the case of organic matter, it's basically what you want out of compost. It's an energy-rich or nutrient-rich, residue. And in any of our processes, the residue is 10 to 15%, or roughly 12% of the dry input material. So in terms of organic material, now you got 12% of what you put in. And considering most organic material has a 30% moisture content, so you get rid of that 30%, and then you're down to 12% of the remaining dry, you've got a little, but it's nutrient rich. So our solution is to convert into the calorific waste into energy without incineration. And if you can, to separate the streams of organic and inorganic, we can take them all together, but there's benefit to the county or whatever the entity is to separate them. So we already said, you know, just to reiterate, pyrolysis is the thermal decomposition of material at elevated temperature. In our case, we're talking about 900 degrees centigrade in the absence of oxygen. So we can process any kind of calorific waste, organic or inorganic, animal fat, complex sugars. I mean, as long as it's got a calorific content, we cannot process PVC at this time. We're kind of working on it, but not right now. So the process is 8 steps long. It's broken into 3 different phases. So I entered this business from the combined heat and power business. I saw this as a combined heat and power system with the fuel as, you know, solid waste or municipal. So let's see if I can do this. So here's, I'm going to start the back end. Here's, I can't see how well. Here's power generation at the end. So once the system is going, we're taking the heat and we're going to use it for, and we're going to combine it. Well, first of all, we're going to use it for drying. And then in drying, we're going to have a moisture content. So we're going to grab that moisture and the heat, some of the heat, and run it through sterilization in autoclaves. So we're using that energy. Oh, first of all, this is the process flow right here. I'm sorry. This thing down here. All the rest of these arrows are the reuse of energy, you know, one way or the other, and then the gray stuff is the exhaust. So anything with a little yellow cloud is a proprietary technology of ours. So the main thing is the pyrolysis right in the center here. I'm going to take you through the process kind of quickly and explain it. So the first part is the preparation of the waste. Now, there's a number of companies out here who basically have same type of stuff. Preparation, put it in pellets or something like that. In the end, what we want is a fluffy material. I saw that somebody has some of that out there. The only difference I'd say of ours versus theirs is that ours is shredded up into really small little pieces. For those of you who ever smoked dope in the past or currently do, it looks a hell of a like, shredded marijuana, is all I can tell you. So that's what this phase does. It's going to take the stuff, it's going to sterilize it, it's going to sort out. So after the sterilization, we get rid of anything that was not supposed to be in there to begin with, like any bottles, any tin cans, anything like that, and then we're going to dry it. So in preparation. So the waste comes in any way that it comes in. Large-sized waste, such as wood waste, has to be shredded in large type pieces of equipment. Large objects are removed. So sterilization uses autoclaves to decontaminate the waste. So the fringe benefit of this is that at this point we still have glass, we still have metal. So when those things, they come out after this, so now they've been sterilized. So for the most part, they're all recyclable materials. And now they're going to be better because they're clean. They're sterilized. So autoclaves look like this. It's cooked at 160 degrees centigrade and 75 psi. It's an outer vessel and an inner drum with reverse forward rotation. So, I mentioned before this stuff comes out looking like marijuana. Well, this is basically what does it right here. And then we sort it. We get rid of the glass, the aluminum, any ferrous or non-ferrous metals, and separate them into separate bins. This technology is not specific to us. There's technology out there, which some of you people have it yourselves, exists. And then we dry it, and as you saw from the diagram before, it's dried from heat from the engines. Initially, the system needs both electricity and natural gas or propane, whatever, to fire up the engines. But once the system is running, it produces all of its own energy, totally. And then any other energy I'm talking about is all energy that's exportable. And when it's dry, it's much more efficient. So now we're coming into the second phase of pyrolysis. And I'll just go right to the next slide. So pyrolysis is an advanced form of gasification. We're using elevated temperatures, to say the least, 900 degrees centigrade. As far as I know, there's nobody else that operates at that kind of temperature. And obviously, since it's pyrolysis, we force the air out and oxygen-starved environment. We can treat any kind of hydrocarbon-based material. As I said before, we like to separate them, but it depends. What we get is what we work with. So the pyrolysis system itself, comes in here at the top. Let's see, this pointer. Where am I? Okay. Here. Comes in here, goes through a plug auger to force the air out, and then more. And then this is the actual pyrolysis chamber. And then as the stuff is cooked and goes to a synthetic gas, the gas is pulled out here, goes through a cyclone system to get out any particles, a tar condenser, an oil condenser. Some of that's recycled back into the system. We've got a oil condenser, a liquor scrubber, and then finally out here is the high-quality synthetic gas. This is where the residue comes out, and with everything working right, this is roughly 12% of the input dry feedstock material. If it's, well, actually, I'm getting ahead of myself, so. Gas cleanup system scrubber. So as I mentioned, it removes the tars, olefins, fines are cycled back through the pyrolyzer to ensure they're further decomposed and to make sure the gas is engine friendly or engine ready. GE, well, it used to be GE Jenbacher, it's just, I don't know who it is now, but it's Jenbacher, has tested our gas in their engines and approved it for operation. Syngas burns more efficiently and cleanly than the waste from which it was made. And it can be processed via Fischer-Tropsch into liquid fuels. So this is important in terms of what are we making here? Are we just making electricity? Well, we will always have a generator at the back end because I said we're self-energized, but we can have lots of other gas, and then you can, depending on the size of the system. And to put that in perspective, if you're processing normally, I'd say 450 tons a day, which to us equates to 250 tons a day of refuse-derived fuel. I mean, when you get the other junk out, when you get the moisture out and stuff like that, that's 2 of our lines, or 2 of our C6 lines, that would produce enough syngas if you were just using it to make electricity to make 10 megawatts of power. Now you can just use some of that electricity to make a half a megawatt or a quarter megawatt, whatever it needs to run our system, and then use the rest of it for Fischer-Tropsch to make liquid fuel. The engine block heat is available. So the last phase is the cleanup and disposal. So the residue, to all practical purposes, it's a residue and not an ash. So it's actually usable in itself. If it's inorganic material, then it's going to, it can be used in low-impact bricks. It can be used in a variety of different things. It can also be used actually as landfill cover. If it's organic material, it's a nutrient-rich soil supplement, as I mentioned before. The emissions are treated through thermal oxidation. We do it, pass it over a ceramic bed of 850 degrees centigrade. The European standards are 800 degrees centigrade for 2 seconds. The reason I reference them is because they are much more stringent than the US standards. So these are how we compare to the European standards. You can see we are much less in every category. So we're making clean energy out of this waste. The residue, so as I said, I said 12%, 10 to 15% by volume for inorganic. It's gray granular form, it's not an ash. The residue, so here's something I forgot. We can process coal dust or coal fines. Coal fines have rare earth metals in them. So when we process it, the residue, the concentration of the rare earths goes up by about a factor of 6. So they're much more accessible than they were before, and that's an area of interest. The most basic stuff is that you can use it as road aggregate. I said brick making, and then in terms of organic, so it's a potassium-rich organic supplement. So the power, 500 tons a day, or 2 lines basically, output is about 10 megawatts. So what I'm saying is that there's enough gas to feed engines to make 10 megawatts because there's some, not redundancies, but I'm running out of time. At any rate, that's why 1,000 tons a day is not just 20, it's 25 megawatts. You have to use some factors and stuff in the terms of converting that over to Fischer-Tropsch and liquid fuels. But when you produce liquid fuels, you're going to produce ultra-low sulfur diesel, naphtha, and fuel oil. You can tweak the ratios but you will always have all three, just by nature of the process. I think, so that's an isometric view of what a 450 ton per day line looks like. We're talking about 4 to 5 acres. And I saw some other things before. I don't know how big they actually were, but this is also obviously an artist's conception. We do not have a plant of this size in operation, to be perfectly honest. And that's it. Well, that's the process again. You know, I love it, but, you know, it's me, it's my business, so what the hell. And I guess we have a couple of questions, maybe.
Do we have any questions in the audience? If not, I have some questions.
Okay.
I'll ask you really quick and I'll
Do I
just have
stay
you
up here?
You just
or-
stay right there.
Okay.
Don't walk off the stage.
Yeah, right. Right.
So one of the things I found really interesting about your technology is the type of feedstock that you can take. So if you could tell us a little bit about the breadth of feedstock, why that's unique in the industry, and also what's unique about the percentages of moisture content that you guys can take into your system.
Right. So the one plant that's in development in upstate New York is doing wastewater treatment sludge, and that's 80% moisture content. That is not normal for us. They have all kinds of special stuff to dry it, get it down to like the 40 or 50% stage before it comes in terms of using us. So in general, we would take any kind of MSW, but we can also take specialty feedstock streams. So if you have, and this thing is supposed to be on plastics, so there was a plant built and shipped to a warehouse in Northern California, and it's sitting there to process plastic specifically into liquid fuels. It was tested, it ran, and then it was put in boxes basically, or containers, and shipped. So if you have a specialty feedstock stream, singular, we can also do just tires. If you lay them down on a bed and just tires, nothing else, and what comes out is tons of synthetic gas, and then your steel belted, the steel from the steel belted radial aspect of it. But we can do MSW. So we are kind of a take anything type technology, to answer the question. You can mix all this stuff together, but it has to go in terms of, basically looking like marijuana. And then it comes out, what we're really making is a synthetic gas, and then everything else is what you do with that synthetic gas. Does that answer the question? Yeah, any of you guys got a question? Come on. Come on. Stifle me, hit me with something. Well, him first.
Usually I'm loud enough to not use a mic, but what's the cost per ton to process the material on average? So if someone's landfilling in New York at $90 or $100 a ton, what does it cost per ton to use your technology in a plant?
So we have two different types or sizes of systems. There's one we call phased, which are smaller systems which do 25 tons a day in terms of a line, and it's roughly a line is 200 feet by 30 feet. And that's on the order of cost of $5-6 million, and it's 25 tons a day. That's 25 tons a day of dry waste, so it might be 30 or 35 going in, depending on the moisture content. In most places in the United States that have any kind of, the cost justification obviously comes in the simplistic cases from the tipping fee and what you get for the electricity you develop. If you can get 5 cents for the electricity and you have a tipping fee on the order of $8 to $10, I don't have all these numbers in memory, but you have a payback of less than 5 years. The larger lines, you saw the isometric. The reason we like 2 lines is because it takes the same number of people to manage 2 lines as it does 1. And in terms of payback, it's probably on the same order of magnitude. They actually are more efficient. You're getting more energy out. So if that helps. Is this gentleman? Oh, okay. No, go ahead.
I have a couple of questions. So the first one is
I can't hear you.
Okay. Is your process mostly batch or continuous?
Is the system batch or continuous? So there's a couple phases of it inside, like the autoclaves that are batch. We try to set it up overall. It is set up overall so that to the pyrolysis system itself and the output, it's continuous.
And the second question was, you put up some emission data. Was it done empirically, or there were some real testing done in the United States for those pollutants you put up on your slides for?
Did you catch that?
Yes, so she was asking if you have data that's based on actual running of the operation of a facility or a unit.
Okay, so there's no systems up and running in the United States at this time. There's one being developed in Virginia to process medical waste. There's the one I mentioned upstate New York. There's the one in a garage or in a warehouse in Northern California. The Northern California one did run at where it was developed and built, and the people who bought it came and checked it out and approved it. It's up to them. We're a technology developer, so we're not going to own and operate systems. If the town of Redwood, California came to us and said, we want, we're running out of space for our landfill, do you have a solution? Yeah, we have a solution, and we will build it according to their specs, like depending on how much waste there is and the type of the waste, and we will commission it, but then we are done. So we don't per se get involved in the permitting and things like that.
So those data you put for, I think, NOx, sulfur dioxide, dioxin, those numbers came from some testing done in Europe? I think one of your slides have the numbers.
About the original unit, the South African unit, and the numbers that were generated from the original equipment.
Are we talking about the one that was shipped to California in the warehouse?
No, I think one of your slides shows about the emission from the system and the numbers you were comparing with the European environmental data, and there were data from European Environmental Regulation Agency for some pollutants. It was the pollutants of NOx. Yes, that's what. So,
right.
So I'm thinking the data generated there was done in Europe.
So this was from a system. These are good, hard numbers. First of all, my hearing, I got to tell you, is not so good. I used to be a pilot and stuff, and I lost, So I'm sorry if I'm not hitting it right on. I apologize. My wife is always yelling at me. Like, she mutters, and I go, yeah, fine. Anyway, so I shouldn't digress. But so those are real numbers. They aren't theoretical numbers. They are real numbers from a system built.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Okay. And, we should maybe talk later when we're closer. I can hear you better. Okay.
So
Sorry.
We're running out of time for the next speaker, so maybe we could. Okay. All right. Great. Yeah. So this industry is really exciting, and it's exciting from a number of standpoints, including what we're talking about with greenhouse gas emissions. Plastics currently going to landfill by 2050 will account for 15% of our global greenhouse gas emissions. So what we're building today is a really important chunk out of what happens in climate change and how we can impact our environment. And my next speaker, which I'm really proud to present to you, is taking a big chunk of that today. So Eric Hartz is the president and co-founder of Nexus Circular, and I'm sure you'll be very excited to hear what he has to say.
Good afternoon, everybody. First of all, just back to appreciate you getting everyone up to shake out. So maybe to put this in a different context, what I wanted to do today is, you just got a good deep dive on pyrolysis, obviously a very educated crowd. What I wanted to try to address here was what's going on in the space and what is the market dynamics and what's happening. Because if you listened obviously to this morning, you are all going to have a lot of decisions to make about who do you partner with, what works, what doesn't work, where do you get the feedstock from, how does everything operate. And I will tell you, sitting up here, that although we all raised our hands about knowing pyrolysis, there's a huge education gap about what plastic pyrolysis is. If you read articles in the press and all the announcements that come out about plants that are going to be at full capacity over the last few years, and then that hasn't happened, if you're not skeptical, you should be. And so hopefully I'm going to help address some of that today and at least provide you with some guidance on how to attack the problem.
Plastic is a long-chain hydrocarbon made from extracted oil and gas. You've seen it in gasoline, for instance. It's like Legos, where the pieces all come together in one stack or in one long chain. So traditionally, plastics are made from the extracted oil and gas, are sent to plastic resin producers that do a process called cracking. They make resins that they then turn into packaging that consumers use and hopefully recycle. Advanced recycling takes the place of the extracted oil and gas. Instead, used plastics, those long-chain hydrocarbons from our Lego exhibit earlier, are broken down back to their original components using pyrolysis, which is heat in the absence of oxygen. They, in turn, run through the same exact process as traditional plastic manufacturing, being cracked back into new plastics. The difference is those molecules came from recycled plastic as opposed to out of the ground. So let's take this up a level. What do we do at Nexus? At Nexus, you see the used plastics. That's a picture of our warehouse and the plastics that we store. Next are the vessels where we do the pyrolysis. And lastly are the hydrocarbons in the liquid form I explained earlier. They, in turn, go to the plastic resin producer, and as you can see, become plastic resin, which has the same characteristics as virgin plastics and can be used in any applications. So let's take one step back even further to the original process I showed you. The Nexus system on the left is the advanced recycling, the plastics that get converted to the hydrocarbons, and then they in turn get sent to the plastic resin producer, and the resins are in turn put into packaging, which the consumer then uses. However, what's different here is it can start over again into used plastics, and this can be done infinitely in a circular process. This is why it's called circular hydrocarbons. So what's unique about advanced recycling is that we can handle a wide variety of plastics. For instance, high-density polyethylene, like milk jugs, low-density polyethylene, like films, polypropylene, like bottle caps, and even polystyrene, styrofoam cups. These variety of plastics are well-suited for advanced recycling. Unfortunately, the others are not. However, the plastics that we do take make up a large portion of the 79% of recycled plastics that aren't handled today. And further, Nexus has perfected the handling of films, which many call hard to recycle plastics. There are different forms of recycling. For example, only 9% of plastics are recycled mechanically today. 12% are actually incinerated. The other 79% is where advanced recycling can shine. But what's unique about advanced recycling is it's done at the molecular level. And for that reason, it has the same quality as virgin plastics, which can be used for any application, and it can be done infinitely. Further, the way Nexus does it is very economic, so it's highly scalable and at the same time reduces emissions. Advanced recycling can truly tackle the plastics challenge. Because advanced recycling has so many positive benefits, it really is an ideal solution to solve the consumer problem. And what is that? They are demanding recycled content in their materials. As a result, all the brands are getting pushed to get recycled content in, and they've set goals anywhere from 20 to 50% recycled content. They, in turn, are turning to their packaging companies and asking for that material, and those packaging companies are turning to the resin producers to say, I need more recycled content, who in turn are turning to us. As a result, this cycle is creating tremendous demand for advanced recycling, and Nexus is ideally positioned to meet this challenge. So advanced recycling is already ideal for addressing the 79% of plastics that head to landfill today. But what's unique about Nexus are three specific things. First, our system only heats once and cools once. And as a result, it's far more energy efficient, it's more environmentally friendly, and most importantly, it's economic. Secondly, the plastics we take in, we can take as is without any pre-treatment. A film we take as a film, a rigid we take as a rigid. If there's some contaminants in it, we can handle that. Finally, the product we make does not need any post-treatment by us or pre-treatment by our customers, allowing it to run through the same plastics production infrastructure outlined earlier. Take all those things together and you have a winning formula, because any innovation only succeeds if the technology works, if it's economic, if it's scalable, and you have a team to execute that. And that is where we believe Nexus is best poised to address the plastics challenge now and going forward.
So we heard a little bit about environmental impact, and plastics that are escaping into our environment are about 40 million metric tons a year, almost about 20 million metric tons into our oceans and our environments that are impacting critical species and ourselves. What we find is industry is a really important part of that conversation, and how do we divert that waste from entering the environment, and how do we create commitments that allow for us to have a full use of cycle of the products that we produce. So our next speaker, I'm really proud to present, Dan Falla, and he's going to talk a little bit about that and a little bit about their commitments and how industry is really impacting the planet and this industry. Well, thank you.
Thank you. I'm Dan Falla. A little bit about my background. So I've been in polymers most of my career. I spent 27 years at Dow Chemical in the flexible packaging area. And my main focus was on sustainability, reduce, reuse, recycle. Right from the very beginning, my focus was on trying to down-gauge films, make it thinner, stronger, cheaper, clearer, etc. After Dow Chemical left the city that I was located in at the time, ended up joining up with Nova Chemicals, doing a very similar job in sustainability and really focusing on flexible packaging, food packaging, and how to make products safer for the consumer. Saw a lot of transitions. Probably the biggest transition that I remember seeing in my career is the switch from the baby food jar. It started off having all those little glass baby food jars over to a flexible pouch. And that's the way the industry is changing, is going from intermaterial substitution and focusing that way. And now even with pyrolysis right now, and we were joking around before about pyrolysis being around. I went to the Canada-wide Science Fair doing a pyrolysis project and taking organic waste and converting it into an oil and eventually into methanol, and actually ran a car on methanol, took it to the energy minister in Canada to demonstrate this, and this was all done in high school. So yeah, for people who've been around the industry for a while, we've been out there, done it, been there, and it continues on. Even during World War II, it was a mechanism to obtain fuel. So it is not something new. It's just the technology is evolving. And as Eric said, there's a lot of different technologies out there for pyrolysis, but it's trying to pick the right one and selectively pick the feedstock that goes into it. And as Nexus knows, if you garbage in, garbage out. So if you put really terrible stuff in, that's the quality of oil that you're going to get that comes out of that. So what I want to do is just give you a general overview of what Shell is today versus Shell was. We were a big oil company, and today we've transitioned, and now we're an energy company, and that's trying to be independent of what that feedstock is. Let's hope I picked this right. Okay. So why sustainability? Why is Shell interested in sustainability? Well, it's being legislated. We've seen that. We've already heard about that today. It's being legislated through. It's being demanded by the consumer. And consumers, through market research studies that we've done and we've seen other companies do, have really demanded to have a more sustainable product available to them. And it's much different than it was back in the mid-2000s, like 2008, 2009, when an energy crunch came. Then the price of oil dropped, and the big push towards the sustainable side or the recycling really dropped off. It's different today. It's being legislated through and is being demanded by the consumer. And Eric put up a great slide from the brand owners that showed what their demand is by 2025. Are they going to meet that? Good question. We'll watch to see what they can do. Sustainability at Shell, and I'll go through these three different sections right here. So we're a big part of that Paris Agreement. And the Paris Agreement was to keep the temperature of the Earth to less than 2 degrees from pre-industrial time frame. And what we're trying to do at Shell is really focus on keeping it to below 1.5%. That's the overall global target. Where we are at Shell ourselves is that we've gone through transition, we've divested some industries, we've also acquired some industries, and we've changed our focus more towards the sustainable side. And let's see if I can get, whoops, I was hoping there was a pointer on this. Okay, so in the center, you can see a little bit of a gap. So it's our portfolio activity, it's what's happening in that area. The efficiency gains, and you'll see in a few slides that we've done a lot of work to change the infrastructure and how we generate chemicals inside of Shell. Shell's, by the way, Shell is not just an oil company or a chemical company. We produce a lot of surfactants, IPA through COVID. Where I live up in Sarnia, Ontario, we have a massive plant up there that's one of the largest producers of IPA, isopropyl alcohol, which was critical during the last few years. Assets, transformation, repurposing. And we're changing the way the infrastructure happens, working with companies like Nexus and other pyrolysis oil producers out there. Carbon and capture storage, and I got a little story a little later on about the capture, carbon, and storage. So being able to grab carbon dioxide and sequester it underground or into other areas. Nature-based solutions, that's the biofuels or the bio kind of materials. Our climate targets, the U.S. Paris, or the Paris Agreement is obviously one of them, and our target is to have a significant effect on keeping it below 1.5 degrees. Net zero by 2050, that is our corporate goal, is to be net zero by 2050, and there is a lot of pressure upon each and every one of us in the corporation to do that. And from 1.7 to 0, and how the bottom part shows exactly how we're progressing along that. Upper management's pretty hard on us in trying to keep those goals. Shell chemical approach, and I'll go into each one of those. Reducing carbon dioxide intensity, so it's properly picking what the feedstock is that we're going to use and how we're going to use it to have as least of an impact on carbon dioxide generation as possible. We're moving towards an ambition of net zero emissions from the manufactured chemicals by addressing the emissions that are coming from our own facilities themselves. On the right-hand side is a lot more of what I'm personally involved in, and that's enabling the circular economy, not only just from waste plastic and sustainability from the waste plastic that's being generated and going through pyrolysis, but in other different areas in trying to get biofuels or biofeedstocks so that we can make chemicals that we all need and demand in our daily lives. So make energy efficiency, low carbon energy sources, carbon capture and storage, and alternative feedstock. So that's the make side of it. The offer, what we're offering to our customers is a solution approach to a lot of their problems that they're running into themselves. And that's the carbon capture, that's the carbon credits that are traded out in the marketplace, as well as through mass balance and being able to transfer the carbon credits, a little bit different definition of what we generate from the waste plastic oil that goes to our refinery in Norco, Louisiana, to our polyethylene plant that's in the process of being started up as we speak right now in Pennsylvania. Champion, and it's really working with partners out there, the Alliance to End Plastic Waste, as well as a number of partners that are out there, a few of which are in this room at this time. So energy efficiency, an example of some of the things that we've done, we're replacing some of our crackers. And what we do is we take ethane, in particular in the Marcellus Shale and the Utica Shale in the Pennsylvania, and that's why we located a polyethylene plant there. But over in Europe, they're talking about replacing a number of furnaces with more efficient furnaces and take the ethane and then crack it to ethylene and reduce the overall carbon dioxide footprint by about 10%. 10% is not a lot, but if everybody starts doing 10%, it has a pretty major impact on the entire industry. Building a new asset. This is the plant that I'm associated with. Shell came along and scooped me up to help start up this polyethylene plant. It is a massive complex, and it's totally backward integrated. We're taking ethane from the Utica and Marcellus Shale that comes in the form of natural gas. It's called wet gas, and the wet gas means that there's too much ethane in it, and historically in the past that ethane would have just been vented or flared. We're now taking that ethane and cracking it into ethylene and then eventually into polyethylene at that particular facility. We have 3 reactors, and we're in the process, as we speak right now, of starting that plant up to produce 3.5 billion pounds per year of polyethylene. And it's also, what's kind of cool about it is they've taken and inputted some of the most modern technology in order to make it one of the most efficient plants in the world. The tail gas from cracking would have just previously been flared. It's hydrogen rich, it's really good hydrogen. So that is put back into the system to help keep those furnaces running. It's an exothermic reaction, so we need a fair bit of energy to start the cracking process. Once you do, then it tends to be self-sufficient. It's fully integrated. There's also a cogen plant that's located there that the Beaver Valley area had a coal-fired generating station just up the road from our plant. They shut that down a few years ago, and now we're supplementing that with a cogen plant. And the amount of energy produced out of that supplies about 18,000 homes in that geographic region. We're also building a fairly large, complex hydrogen facility over in Europe. And we saw earlier on in a presentation of a trash truck with the RNG that's on the roof. Much similar kind of concept, using hydrogen fuel cells, using hydrogen in a storage, and being able to power a number of different things. And that that hydrogen is being generated from electricity. So it's about 1.3 kilotons per year that facility over in Europe is going to generate for a number of different applications. And when you burn it, you produce water. And so it's a very, very clean process. We're also very much involved in the solar cell systems. We're also involved in windmills and obtaining power from all of those. Over in Europe, we installed 76,000 cells in order to generate electricity that helps power the community as well as our own processes in the chemical industry. And they were just interesting point is that engineering inside of Shell is just massive, and being able to who and what's involved is just an unbelievable number of people. When we went at the peak of construction for our plant in Pennsylvania, which is just northwest of Pittsburgh, we had over 9,000 contractors, and I think at that point it was the single largest construction project in the United States. And then COVID hit, and then we had 0, and then we could only bring back, I think, 350 a week, so it took us a while to get back to full staff. So developing electric cracking, we also, as I said, we also partner up with other people. We've partnered up with Dow Chemical to develop a new technology for cracking of ethane into ethylene, and that's using electricity instead of the steam crackers of the older days. And they're dramatically more efficient. And as you can see by this slide, it saves about 80%. So it's a rather dramatic effect. And we're very open to working with our competitors as well as our customers to bring the right solutions to the marketplace. Commercializing lower carbon footprint technology for ethylene. We're also looking at different ways to produce ethane and ethylene to the marketplace. The Gulf Coast has a pipeline that's ethylene, and up in northern Canada and Alberta, we actually have pipelines that run from Alberta east that can carry ethylene to the chemical companies in the chemical valley of Ontario. So we're very much involved in that, and we're looking for alternatives in that area. So capturing carbon and storage, I heard, I think, the third speaker this morning talk about carbon sequestering. We've been involved in that area for a while now. We have a facility up in Alberta that has safely sequestered 5 million tons of carbon dioxide. So as an exploration company, the old historic who Shell was, it was out there exploring for where hydrocarbons were so we could extract those. That same technology can be used to go the opposite way. So using and identifying where these pockets exist that we can capture carbon dioxide, concentrate it up into a liquid, and inject it down well into long-term, essentially lifetime storage. For example, all of the industry within the Pittsburgh area, if we captured all of the carbon dioxide from those industries, we've identified in that geographic region where we could sequester 200 years of production from that industry into long-term downwell storage. And we're actively pursuing that technology at this point. And as this slide shows, we've already done 5 million tons up in northern Alberta. So back to plastics again. Back in 2019, Shell announced that we're going to chemically recycle, and I've been taught to not call it chemical recycle, but more advanced recycle, because it kind of gives a bad name to the industry. We're advanced recycle, and it's broken up into 3 different geographic locations. Domestically here in the United States, we're responsible for 350,000 tons of that, or kiloton. So it's 1 million tons globally. We're responsible for 350 of that, and Europe and Asia Pacific are the 2 other geographic locations. And I'll get back into this a little bit more. We do have an equity stake in Blue Alp, but we also work with other partners here in an offtake situation. For example, Nexus did a phenomenally fun project with Nexus just recently, and that Shell's a major sponsor of the New Orleans Jazz Festival, and I was responsible for managing the plastic recycling coming out of that facility. It was pilot. Jazz Fest is very difficult to work with. They don't want to change things. So with Nexus' assistance, we've been able to demonstrate that we can take the waste plastic that is being generated at that festival and use it for something good. An example of one specific area, I didn't realize, but just about absolutely everything in Louisiana is fried. Deep fried this, deep fried that. And there's all kinds of these jugs that I was noticing. We had a lot of meetings beforehand to pre-plan for Jazz Fest and how we're going to recycle stuff. And it was like an aha moment as I'm riding around on my golf cart looking, going, damn, there's a lot of oil jugs sitting around here. So we started working with Jazz Fest and captured as many as we could. We have to change things a little bit because the jugs weren't being picked up as often enough, but they all contain residual amounts of vegetable oil. And with the pyrolysis process, that's great, it's phenomenal. We have these high density jugs that are nice and clean, and we're in the process of doing a pilot study now, and Jazz Fest has just grabbed onto this whole concept and is opening up the doors to us to do a lot more for next year. The other fun part was being able to take day-old, stale beer cans that are half full with crawfish guts mixed in with the bags and stuff, and somehow having to mechanically, individually, recycle that material into different streams. So the other areas that we're involved with is a lot of alternative feedstock, a lot of bio stuff, really focusing on RNG, the organics that are coming out of pyrolysis or gasification, being able to do biodigestion, and there's a massive project inside of Shell looking at renewable natural gas and identifying feedstock sources for all of that. Again, back into the 1 million tons. So the challenge here is that in the United States, there's a lot of plastic that is used, and it's going through carbon sequestering by putting it into landfill, but we want to be able to use it as a feedstock into our process, and hopefully we can have a few of our reactors that are full 100% classified as sustainable polyethylene. And the way that happens is we get oil from companies such as Nexus through ISCC Plus certification. We can claim mass balance, so it is cracked down in Louisiana, and then we can transfer those carbon credits up to our plant in Pennsylvania and produce a sustainable polyethylene that can be used into the marketplace. I'm not even going to go through this because we've talked about chemical recycling or advanced recycling already today. So renewable solutions, a number of different offers, certified renewable chemicals and products made from bio-based feedstock. We're very actively involved with the brand owners as well as the NGOs in trying to support this whole industry. And certified renewable chemical products made from the biocircular feedstock. So again, we're looking at multiple different areas, not only just waste plastic, but we're also looking into the biofuels and the biomaterials. And again, the partnerships, Dow and Shell, as I had mentioned about the ethylene and coming up with a more efficient system for doing it, commercializing lower carbon footprint technology for ethylene, and so that's the membrane concept, and the acceleration of waste to chemicals technology. And it's somewhat of a battle inside of Shell, and we're competing, our plastics division is competing with the chemicals division as to who gets those carbon credits that are coming out of the pyrolysis. And it's fun to sit back and watch how that happens, and it's people at a very senior level that has to make those decisions. You have to put it where you're going to make the most amount of money. That's it. Questions?
One quick question. Just how to Shell, and actually the whole panel, I'm seeing the EPA has that pyrolysis gasification. Is it going to be labeled as incineration? How do you see that kind of going? Have you been following that at all?
I have, and I have an answer for that.
Yeah,
I cannot bring data to an emotional argument.
No, I agree. I think we're on the same side of this one. It was just, yeah.
I can only add to that. I actually was on the Hill a week ago with the Senate and Congress people, and we are trying to bring facts, and they will listen if you start to crack through the noise. There was a study done by an NGO. They signed a letter to this that literally is just not factual. So it's 1,000 cuts the other way. It's going to take a lot of effort.
And the whole PFAS situation is exactly the same way. There's no true definition of what a PFAS is. So, okay, it contains fluorine. That means it has to be a PFAS. No. Again, you can't bring data to an emotional argument. So
Keep up the fight, I guess.
Continuing on that, was actually one of my questions. What do you think that we can do from solutions or ask from our legislators as like a solution that helps move this industry forward?
damn, that's a loaded question. So you have the extended producer responsibility. So the packager has to pay a tax, especially in Canada right now, as well as over in Europe. There's no really easy solution to that because the lobbyists are so powerful in the United States. Should we be taxing the waste generator, the aggregator, the people that are putting it into landfills? How do we divert stuff that's away from, how do we divert it away from landfill and force it to go into recycling? Mechanical recycling, I agree with Eric. Mechanical recycling is first priority #1, followed by that is what is the most sustainable, logical way to do this that makes environmental sense? Does it make sense to take a waste material and ship it 2,000 miles? When you have to look at the carbon footprint as to what's the most efficient way of doing that. So there's no real straight answer to that.
Since you brought up PFAS and the EPA, and the
I cannot bring data to an emotional argument.
I'm just curious from the folks that have pyrolysis units, or if they have any data on PFAS destruction pre and post pyrolysis.
Absolutely. From what I've learned so far, once you reach a certain temperature, like 1,000 degrees, is going to take care of it. I know with our by the way, our Norco, Louisiana cracker is the only heavy oil cracker left in North America that can take all the cuts that the pyrolysis can produce, and it definitely goes above that 1,000 degrees and would destroy the PFAS. But please.
So basically, in support of that, we did some studies, and about 700 to 800 degrees centigrade destroyed about 79% of the PFAS in a waste stream. We're operating at 900. We have not tested it yet, but we think we destroy most of the, almost all the PFAS in a waste stream.
The only thing I can add to that too is we went through.
Hang on one sec.
Oh, sorry. We went through the EPA's 90-day TSCA and other review. It took 2 years. So I'm just letting you know, we were extremely thorough, went with the engineers, did a lot of testing, the temps that you hear about and things of that sort. We had to go through all those processes. What was also interesting is this material is actually similar to what's being fed into a cracker today, but because of the source, it was like starting from scratch. So the answer is we think it's been addressed regulatorily, that it's okay, and we're hoping that we can move ahead. So.
Probably the biggest thing that we're lacking right now with the PFAS situation is a definition of what PFAS really is. Yeah, we need a definition. And then we can evaluate whether the additives we're putting into our polymers qualify or fall under that scenario.
And to what level that you're going to test to. At 4 parts per quadrillion, it's a non-starter right off the bat when you can't even have labs to be able to determine the level.
Yeah, so let me use an example of a fluoropolymer processing aid, which is actively used in polymer processing. It was invented by DuPont. Teflon is a really good example of that, same kind of concept. We put it in, if we decide to put it in, we haven't started making those products yet, we're still in transition right now and looking at alternatives. But if we put it in, we're putting it in at probably 12 parts per million of fluorine, and nuclear activation detection limit is about 10 parts per million, and you can use combustion ion chromatography and get down to 5 parts per million. But we put it into one layer of a 9-layer film, and we put it in at a dosage rate of 12, then you divide that by the number of layers and the concentration, it's below detection limits. But the question is, are you adding any PFAS-containing materials to your products? It comes back to, well, what's the definition of what PFAS is? And is that fluoropolymer processing aid a PFAS? We need a definition from FDA on that.
To follow that up, we run the PFAS forum. So if you want more info on that, we've got, we'll be doing that forum in May next year in Orlando.
I believe there was a gentleman here who had a question earlier.
Somebody over here had a question? Yep.
Really quickly, it's for Mr. Pfeiffer. Does your process can produce biochar?
Does your process produce a biochar?
Jim, if you could talk in the mic. I hate to get you to stand up. If I come up here, I think we're going to get feedback.
So I'm sorry, in terms of processing organic waste or inorganic waste? Okay, so organic waste, it's a nutrient-rich soil supplement. It's organic. In terms of inorganic waste, it's a residue that can be used in a number of things, like making bricks, you know, other things like that. It's inert. That's the main thing. It's inert. Does that answer your question? Okay. Sorry.
Any other questions for the panel?
So do you guys find any kind of land application for the biochar you guys have? Do you guys have any kind of conversation with the USDA for farmers' application as a soil amendment?
Land application for biochar.
So we focus more right now as an asphalt additive. It's just easier kind of where we are, but it can be, I mean, we've had it tested, and we've also looked at ash content and all those types of things, and it can be used as a soil amendment as well. Again, we're hitting very high temperatures at the end, especially for the, what we call, it's really carbon black that's coming out the other end. Now, garbage in, garbage out, as Dan said, so we're also not taking a lot of things that would kind of make that difficult to do.
I don't know what else I can say besides what I said before in terms of if it's organic, it comes out as a nutrient-rich soil supplement, and if it's inorganic, just, you know, as Eric said, you can use it for other products and stuff. It's not an ash, it's inert.
And then there are other technologies you can overlay onto the carbon black to bring it down into different size dispersions. So you can create high value nano-sized carbon black out of the material if that's your use or your end of life that you want for it.
All right, if there are no other questions, we are going to break for lunch. So in the back of your name badge is a lunch ticket. We are going to have somebody posted right outside. We're going to be eating outside today, so great weather. I love it. We'll have somebody at the start of the buffet line to collect your tickets, okay? Thank you, everybody, and thank you, panel. Wonderful.